We're in gate 44, and today is a third line day. We have the line called interference. This is the line of bonds made and broken. This is the line of discovery and trial and error. There are going to be mistakes made here. This is the line of adaptation, and it's the end of the lower trigram process. In this line, we have the two earlier processes integrated together. The lifetime learning says the failure to interact based on circumstances. This is a keen sense of what the ego is on the other side, because it's a line that recognizes that there is an ego on the other side, and it has a sensory connection to it. Third lines can be very irresponsible. Third lines, by their very nature, they know that there is something at the other end of the channel. It's just in this particular case, they really don't know what it is or how it works. They just know it's there. They have to connect to it in order to find out what it is and how it works. The exaltation says the ability to recognize the threat of interference and prepare for its effects, the alertness and instincts to handle the ego of others. That capability does not mean that they will interact with the ego. The 44 threes, they can have a lot of trouble getting through this whole channel. They make contact with the ego, and on this side, they can recognize it. But the moment that the splenic system actually meets the ego, there is fear in the splenic system. It's the fear of the past. Learning how to handle the ego is not easy for the spleen. And why should it be? It's not a motor. It is easily overpowered by the adrenaline system of the root or the ego system that hits it. It has to be clear in its awareness in order to be able to handle the ego. And without having had experience of the ego, that 44 can be blown away because it doesn't stand up and have the actual power that the ego has. The ego is not aware, but it is a motor. And the 44 would like to have contact to that motor because it is healthy and it turns on the system. At the same time, when the 44 makes contact, it's cautious because it senses the power of the ego. It's like if you get onto a horse for the first time, and suddenly you think, holy crap, it's high up here. This is a big animal and I really don't know what it's thinking. And it could do a weird thing any moment. And so you make contact with the horse and then you think, like, I'm going to get off now. You've been there, done that. And this is what happens to the 44. It hooks into the ego and then it's like, oh my God, all this power. Hold on, I'm getting off. And it's the reverse of what coming to meet is. They come to meet and then they turn around and go away really quickly. You cannot stop a salesperson from quitting, no matter what you do. If that's their will, you can't do anything about it. It doesn't matter how much you try to manipulate them. The fact of the matter is that if you haven't entered into that relationship properly, into the career properly, the work, whatever it is, as yourself, that's what properly means, then instead of having the occasional interference, the ego has refused to accept your awareness. And you end up with a lifetime of interference. And of course, that can be very uncomfortable. In the exalted, which is the inevitable places you get to, your sixth line phase as a third line, you get to that point in your life where you've dealt with so many egos that you know which ones you can work with and you know which ones you can't. It's not going to stop you banging into things and having new experiences, but you've got that kind of awareness, you've got the memory of it. And I've got a squirrel. Hello, Squiz. Okay, nuts for the squirrel. 1 second. Here you go. Understanding your mechanic can save you a lot of grief. If you know that that's what's there for you, you also know that the reward is there when you find the right ego to work with, in the success that can manifest, the success that can come out of that. The 4426 is a projector channel. It's a projector who, with only the 44, has very little power to attract recognition other than in specific existential moments. But the moment that you have that definition, you've got that big, juicy ego there, the opportunity to be recognized comes a lot quicker because the power is there. At the point that the 4426 come together, that's the point in which the tribe will recognize their power. In the detriment, a deluded response to interference that gets stuck in projection and as a result is unrealistic in appraisal and error prone. The possibility that the instinct cannot handle the egos of others. This is where the third line really steps back. It steps into the ego field, it catches it all and it says, oh, yeah, I really don't want to deal with that because it's a bit too much for me. It's irresponsibility in coming to meet. We know our third lines can be irresponsible at times. This is a manager who has this line is going to make bonds and break them. It's the manager who hires a strong ego, someone who does a wonderful job, but he fires them anyway because he can't stand that huge ego. It doesn't matter how well the job has been done. Or it's the manager who meets someone and he knows that they do a terrific job, but he refuses to work with their ego. So he doesn't bother hiring them at all. I mean, both the old exalted and the detriment are kind of the same process, really. It is instantly more confusing for the detriment because it is fixed in Neptune, and Neptune can have a fuzzy kind of thing going on. And they can also have the possibility for deep creativity or for spiritual work. All of this can come through this detriment. And this spiritual work, it could have a material aspect to it, which of course is really good news for this line within this channel. The grounding is coming through gate 24 in the third line, which is called the addict. Third lines, oh my God, they're courageous beings. Really, our third lines are incredible. There's nothing quite like them. They're even more courageous than the fourth line, really, because the fourth line's transpersonal. That it knows what it's doing. It knows what it's externalizing and it knows what's on the other side, what is there to be met. But a third line doesn't. And the third line has a kind of blind courage. They carry within them this deep conviction that all third lines have. That's why they're so easy to break, really. And all third lines are designed only to engage and to then step away because that's their nature. Their trial and error, their process of hold on a minute. Yes, okay. Well, I'm going to have to go and get some more. The jar of nuts is empty. Poor squirrel. Well, okay, I'll get those later. I won't go and get those now. Where was I? Our third line's being very courageous. Yeah, they have this trial and error thing, the process of making mistakes. And we have such a negative relationship to the word mistake. But for the third line process, it's a way in which their thinking gets clarified. It is truly a discovery for them. It's the knower banging into an outside force unexpectedly with its knowing, only to discover that its knowing either doesn't stand up or it really does stand up, but it's going to discover something along the way. And they keep doing it. So in a way, it has this addictive quality. It's their process. They can't help it, nor should they try. Being a third line means this process of bumping into things and making a bond, breaking a bond, discovering something, trial and error, all of the things that go with that. But ultimately, it's a massive process of discovery from which we all benefit. I mean, this is something that we all must remember as well. We all benefit from what the third line bungs into. The moon has been in gate 44 since 8:50. It's hanging out there with the sun. At 10:38, the moon, hold on a minute, that can't be right, can it? I've got that bit wrong somewhere. It can't go in at 10:38. I think it's somewhere else. But the moon has certainly been in 44 since this morning. Anyway, later on, the moon moves into gate 1. Gate 1 is the role of creative self-expression. Yeah, I'll put myself off now. It's an individual gate. It's in the G center. It's doing its thing. It's looking for the 8th gate so that it can unleash its creativity onto the world. which it can't do on its own, really. So luckily, Uranus is in gate 8 at the moment. So we do have the channel of inspiration. We have a design of being a creative role model. This channel brings the possibility of being creatively different from everyone else. There's no homogenization here. And simply by being yourself, you will always get the recognition you deserve. And you always have the possibility of empowering others and bringing mutation. Gate 43 is next. More individuality as we move up to the Ajna and we find the gate of insight, the gate of individual mental knowing. But there are no facts here. The knowing may be imaginary. It could be delusional. It will have its own unique perspective, for sure. It's a gate of possibility. Once the knowing is fully conceptualized, it is only waiting for the invitation to have access to the throat and to expression. Whenever you see individuality in someone's design, they're going to have to be able in their life to be able to explain that aspect of their nature. Individuals must explain themselves. It's part of their makeup. So every individual gate that you have in your design, that's a gate that in your lifetime you will have to explain somehow. And if you can't explain yourself to the satisfaction of the collective, who don't really trust you in the first place, this can be a place where you're ostracized or considered a little bit weird. The 43, when it's in the channel with the 23, that channel is called the genius to freak. And this really describes the way that the individual can be seen in the world. That's it for now. I'm going to brush up on my times, my moon times. And tomorrow we will be back for the 4th line. And yeah, I better go and get some nuts for the squirrel. Otherwise he'll be in here giving this presentation instead of me. I will be off and I will see you tomorrow. Thank you for joining me. Take care and go gently.